so this session we'll be looking at reporting and data security, and some of the reports that we'll be looking at is the Audit Trail report. And you know what the Audit Trail is? Basically, the Audit Trail is like a activity list of every change that take place in the system. And we're going to be looking at a journal entries report. We're going to be looking at accounts payables and accounts receivables reports. We're going to be looking at transaction details reports, and this is basically a listing of your transaction that you would prepare for your auditors, whether that be your internal or your external auditors. And we are going to be looking at a trial balance report and your income and expenditure statement, which we'll be looking at by a month-to-month report, and we'll be looking at it by class. So we'll be looking at it for the different units, and we'll be looking at it for the overall establishment on a month-to-month basis. We will be looking at a budgeted versus actual report, and at this beginning of this course you'd have created a budget, and we have done some transactions, so we are going to basically look at the variance between what we budgeted for and what actually took place. And we are going to look at the item quick report. In terms of data security, we are going to be looking at data backup, which is backup to a flash drive, a local computer, or to a network location. And we'll be looking at data backup to cloud. Sorry, and that is basically the data is stored on a server that is external, so it is not stored on your local network, it's stored on the internet. So we have the Intuit service that is provided in the software that you can use for backup, but it is expensive, so a lot of persons don't use that service. You have Google Drive, which is a Google product. You have OneDrive, and you have Dropbox that you can also use. And we'll also be looking at scheduling automatic backups. Therefore, the system will automatically back up on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, or so on. Alright, so let's get started. Alright, so we're going to start by looking at the Audit Trail report. Alright, so all reports are found under reports on the menu bar. Right, and to go to the Audit Trail report, you'd go to reports, and you go to accountant and taxes, and you click on Audit Trail. And as I said earlier, the Audit Trail is basically a listing of all the transactions that are all the changes that took place. So this is by default, this is at today, so this is filtering just the 29th. So if we want to see all the transactions that took place since we started the course, the first session was about the 21st. So if we should click on the 21st, to the 29th and click refresh, it will show every single transaction that was done. Right, so the very first transaction that we did is also there. Currently, this is being sorted by. Alright, we have $100,000 here, the 23rd of the 9th. Oh, this is the opening balance. So it starts at the top. So basically, the first transaction was actually the 23rd opening balance entry. So this 100,000 was actually the first entry that we did. And the last entry we did was a transfer of $300,000, and it is right there. So we have some columns here that basically give us the date and the time. That's the second column, basically gives you the date the transaction took place and the time that the transaction took place. Very, very important. And also the user who modified the transaction. So the only user that is set up on this system and who has done transaction is the admin user. So you will see that it has been last modified by admin, and it shows what the transaction was before. So where you have prior and latest, it's basically referring to the same transaction. So it is showing that this, where you have this Tom Strokes transaction here, the difference in the second, the transaction done 156.08 and the transaction done 158.07 is that the reference number here was 1 and it was then changed to 18562. So that is the change, and the change is highlighted right here. So that is how you use the audit trail. So if there are any changes in your system that you are wondering, who would have made that change, you can easily use the audit trail report. So if you have done your report and then you see the figures different and you can't account for the change, the audit trail report can actually account for that change. So that is how you would basically generate the audit trail report. And you can filter from the first day you start using the system to today's date, to the very day. Right, so that is the audit trail report. And you can actually print this report. So all the reports can be printed, they can be saved to a PDF. Yes, ma'am?
How far back in the years can it go? As far back as possible?
As far back as possible. As far back as possible.
Okay.
Alright, so that is the audit trail report, right? And we're going to move on to the journal entries report. Basically, every single transaction, as long as it is a posting entry, it creates a journal in the background. So QuickBooks basically just design this nice flowchart interface to make it easier for persons who may not have the necessary accounting skills, or just to make the software easier and make persons' life easier. But every single transaction that you save, QuickBooks passes the double entry in the background. So there is a double entry for every single transaction. Alright, so we are going to look at this report, call it Journal Entries Report. Basically will show the journals behind every single transaction that you do on the system. So to access this report, you would still go to Reports, and you will go to Accountant and Taxes, and you will go to the Journal Entries Report. And here it is showing us entries from the 23rd, and that's the day when we actually start posting. So it shows the entries in detail with memos. So it shows this inventory adjustment where the inventory asset account was credited and the opening balance equity account was debited. The purchase from Celebration brand shows where accounts payables was credited here. It shows the transaction number, and it shows where the inventory account has been debited. So it shows all the entries in date order, and it has the reference numbers as well, so you can refer to the source document. So all the journals are there. Every single journal is there. Alright, and you can use the filters. So if you want to look at the journals that we did yesterday, which is the 28th, we can select that we only want to see what we did for the 28th, and we refresh. And the only thing we did yesterday was to post, well, I think it is using the transaction date. I think we did other transactions for yesterday, but if you want to look at the transaction dates for yesterday, then the 28th, then you would filter using the 28th. And this is an entry we had used yesterday to balance the reconciliation. Alright, so that's basically the journal report, and it may be necessary to understand how your journals, how QuickBooks basically pass your journals whenever you make a transaction. So once you enter a transaction, you can come here to check, because you would have the accounting background and the knowledge to look at the entry to see whether or not you are doing the correct thing.
Sure.
We're now going to be looking at accounts payables and accounts receivables report, and these reports are also very important reports, because the accounts payables report is necessary to basically analyze whether or not you have overpaid a vendor, whether or not you have as I said, pay a bill twice, because I know that is common in some of the public institutions where maybe they pay a bill based on a copy, and then the original bill come in, and then the original bill is also paid, or they pay a bill based on an estimate, and then an invoice comes in and the invoice is also paid. Supplier collects check, and that results in a duplication of the actual payment. So I'm going to show you how to actually analyze your vendor account or your supplier's account. So to analyze your supplier's account, you're going to go to report, and you're going to go to vendors and payables, and you're going to click on vendor balance detail. Alright, and your vendor balance detail. The filters that I apply here are all dates, and this means that every single transaction that was done for vendors since we started. Alright, so here I can see where you have brown stationery, you have the date of the transaction, and here what we basically have here is the invoice. So we have the invoice number here, the amount, and we have the check that was used to pay this bill and the amount that is on the check, and we have a balance here of 0. Alright, John Doe AC on the other hand, here we have a check that would go against that 100,000, and we have another check that would go against this $25,000, which is the stale dated check example that we demonstrated. So looking at the vendors, looking at this detail, we have a balance of $10,000 here. So it's clearly showing us that this $10,000 is coming from the second transaction here. So this $10,000 is outstanding. If you want to do a report that would just show this particular vendor, you can go to customize report and you go to filters. So using your filters is very important. So you go to filters and you're going to filter by, you can search for the filter, you're going to filter by name, which is the name of the vendor. And you search for the name, or you can type it in. You type the name in and you select OK. So there you have basically have an analysis of this particular account. So you can basically print this off and email it to them to show them that the bill that they're saying that is outstanding, that is the check that it was paid by, and it would basically show them a history of their payment. So it's like a statement, right, that you would provide to your vendors. Right, it's a very important tool to prevent duplication of payments.
One question, sir.
Yes, go ahead.
The filter, is it automatically generated or we have to set it up?
No, you have to set the filter. You have to set the filter. If you clear the filter, it will show everybody. It will show all the vendors. So if you should remove this filter, the name filter, and you should say, if you should make it blank, it will show all your vendors. So here we have Brown Stationery's, Celebration Brands, John Doe AC, and we have JPS, which is being owed $100,000. And this is a very good tool in planning your accounts payables, to know which vendors you are able to pay at a particular date. Alright, so that is the accounts payables. The accounts receivables is similar, but schools are not for profit, so you may just need to, or you may just want to have a look at the students who have paid, and to do so you'd go to customers and account and receivables, and you'd go to customer balance detail, and what it shows here is that you have 3 students that you had invoice, 2 students paid in full, and 1 student paid a part payment of $4,000. It shows that your balance here your receivables balance is actually $4,000. Those are fees that you did not collect, or you have not collected as yet. So we won't go very deep into receivables. Alright, so we are going to move on to transaction details report. And this report is very important where auditing is concerned. Because when you are doing an audit, your auditors will require that you, well, some auditors don't require that you do a backup of QuickBooks and send it to them, because they may be using a different platform. Because you have some auditors who still use Microsoft Excel. You have some auditors who are using Sage 50 or Peachtree. So they are using a different platform. Also, if you are using a QuickBooks 2021 and they are using a QuickBooks 2015 and you give them a backup of your file, the file will not open on their system. Because it is not, the files are not backward compatible. So in that case, what you would need to do is to generate a listing of all the transactions that are in your accounts for a particular period. And what you'll be doing is to generate a transaction listing. And to do so, you'll go to accountant and you'd select transaction detail by account. So you can provide this report. So this report basically lists every single transaction that is in QuickBooks, and you can make the dates be all if you want to see everything from inception. So here we are seeing the opening balance transaction here for this bank account. We are seeing subvention opening balance 2 million, and the $100,000 check. We are seeing the payment here to collector of taxes. We are seeing every single transaction. Once you give this to your auditors, they would basically have, as I said, all your transactions. In detail. So you'd have check number, which would be the number column. You'd have the name column, which is, if it's a receipt, it would be the name that you receive the funds from. If it's a payment, it would be the name that you write the check to. It also have the class. But let's say this is for a particular unit. Let's say you want to generate it for those fees. Alright, a safe way to do it to ensure you capture everything is to use check number or reference number. But if you are using the class consistently, you can also use the filter here. So you can go to customize report, and you can go to filters, and you can go to class, and you can type fees, or you can select it. Only transactions we'll be seeing here are school fees transactions. So for instance, the auditor is looking at school fees, then you would basically give them this report for the school fees. So these are all the transactions as it relates to the school fees account. And that is there's a reason why the system prompted to assign a class, because as I said earlier, transactions that are not class, they will be basically in a column on your reports. When you bring up a say a income and expenditure by class, it would be in an unclassified column. So if you want to, for instance, bring up another area like maybe the tuck shop, you would it's the same procedure. You'd go to customize report, filters, and you'd search for the class filter, and then you would select the relevant class, and here we bring up the transactions for the tuck shop. And this is very detailed. It shows in the memo actual items that were sold are the actual items that were purchased. Okay, so there's another report that you may need to bring up for your auditors, and that is your general ledger report. And as I said, all reports are under reporting. So we go to reports, and you would go to accountant and taxes, and we would click on general ledger. And this is quite similar to the report that we just brought up. This is quite a similar report to the report that we just brought up. Because basically what this does is to list the transactions, just as the transaction listing report lists the transactions. The only thing that is different with this report is that the title is called general ledger. Right, we have not seen any differences on this report, and it has less fields or less columns because we don't have the class column here where we can choose the class. Right, but say for instance you're doing a general ledger report, QuickBooks allow you to add columns. So in doing your reports, you can add the columns that you want to be available. So if you want to add class to this general ledger report, you can add that column. And the other thing with this report don't it's a more, I would say it's a more compact report, but it's basically the same information that you would get from a transaction listing report. So you can use both of these reports. It all depends on what your auditor would need. So the fact that we have enabled class here, we can filter by class for this report as well. So we go to customize report, and we're going to look for, can search for class. No, we should be going to filters. So filters, and it's the same procedure. Alright, but this report, whenever you do a filter, it will still have the items there that does not meet the criteria. So you end up with some zeros for the amounts that for the line items that don't meet the fees criteria. So I would prefer to use the transaction listing report to give to my auditor than this general ledger report. It's just that this general ledger report basically will give you all your accounts, regardless if they have a balance or not. I think that is it for transaction details report. We're going to be looking at your trial balance. And that your trial balance is very important. Before you generate your financial statement, you need to generate your trial balance. And that is also found under your trial, under your accountant and taxes menu. So you click on trial balance and your trial balance should balance. If your trial balance is not balancing, it means that you have a very serious problem. It means that your QuickBooks data is corrupted. Because every entry, as I said to you, every entry that goes on in the system uses the double entry principle, where one account gives and another account receives. And for every credit, there has to be a corresponding debit entry. So our trial balance is at 6.3 million roughly, and it shows all the accounts that has a balance. So it will show your bank accounts with debit balances, accounts receivables with debit balances, your inventory account. So your balance sheet accounts, your asset accounts would be on the debit side, and your payables and liabilities and equities would be on the credit side, and your income. Your expenditure now would have a debit balance. So that's the trial balance report, and this is a good monitoring tool, because if your entries are not being posted correctly, or if your accounts are not set up properly, or even the items that are linked to the accounts are not set up properly, you will have stuff like expenditure having a credit balance on your trial balance. You will have stuff like accounts payables having a debit balance. So once you see those once you generate a trial balance and you see stuff like those, you know that something is wrong. So this report is a very important report before you get to preparing final accounts then. And the trial balance can be, everything on the system can be filtered based on class. So you can choose that you just want fees. Alright, but there's something very important as it relates to trial balance by class. If you do a trial balance by class, chances are your trial balance will not balance. Because if, for instance, you did not assign a class to a transaction, to the other side of a transaction, it will not filter. So here we have it here. Debits are saying 2,060,000 and credits are saying 2,015,000. So you know that somewhere along the line a class was not assigned. Let's try and do it for the talk shop. I don't think we had much transactions for the talk shop, but let's look at, okay, and it's the same thing here. So maybe it's not one of the best filters to use when you're doing a trial, but when you want to generate a trial balance for a particular unit, because if you are not using the classes consistently, you may end up not getting what you want from the trial balance. So So we are going to go back to broad child balance. We're going to remove all filters. And we're going to look at it for all I think when we brought it up before, it was just for September, so it was for 1 month. We did not look at the opening balance entries. But this now is the comprehensive child balance. So this has all the transactions. So this is from the end of August to date, and it is balanced.